This is the Tim and Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast, diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, NoNonsenseForex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 216 is brought to us by Bybit. You guys saw the title of this episode. You know the best way to earn Bitcoin without having to spend your hard-earned money on it is to simply go trade for it. And you can not only do this on the best exchange in the entire world, which is Bybit, you can get rewarded for it left, right, and center. Here's how you do that. You go down to the show notes below. Click on the Bybit blog. It is the very first link I give you. Read the blog. Make sure it's for you if it is. Click my affiliate link at the bottom and get yourself signed up. You are going to want as much Bitcoin as humanly possible. Now, you can either spend your hard-earned money on that, you can earn it by trading, or you can simply do both. I recommend both. Not financial advice, but you have to get started and do it here because with Bybit, membership has its rewards. It is the Tim and Contrarian Podcast, and amongst my many, many downfalls, one of the things I have learned over time, I am quite good at, is research. And I think anybody who's known me throughout the lifespan of this podcast here, or through my trading material on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, can agree that this is one of my strengths. But either way, I can say with confidence that the ability to do proper research is one of my strengths. Now, the problem is when I do research for the purpose of this podcast, or when I do deep research, I should say, I uncover some pretty crazy shit. Like if you remember not long ago, the episode called Good Night and Good Luck, I discovered something that almost nobody was talking about because I just don't think most people know, is that if you take real inflation numbers instead of the goofy fabricated numbers our government gives us here in the United States, inflation and loss of purchasing power over the last 5 years was probably 2.5 times what was actually reported. And what was reported was scary. But imagine 2.5 times that. It's awful. And this has really kind of recalibrated the way I choose to save and invest my money. And there will be a podcast on this soon. But you better believe that Bitcoin is a large part of this overall equation. Even more so now than it was before. Because I have done further research on just how scarce Bitcoin is about to become. Now, I've done an episode on this before saying, hey guys, this is finite. Unlike literally everything else, this is finite, and it makes a huge difference, and you must understand this difference. When something is finite, it runs out. It can run out almost completely. And I have learned through the research I have done over these past 2 weeks that we are going to run out of Bitcoin probably sooner than later. And when that day comes, you are really going to want to be on the side of people who actually have it as opposed to the people who don't. Because for the longest time, it was a question of, okay, will this new thing that just came out of nowhere become accepted as money on this planet? The last time we did something like this was hundreds of years ago when we decided that fiat currency was going to be a representation of money. And even back then, we based it on gold. Bitcoin isn't based on anything. So people didn't think this was ever going to happen, but it did, and it has. It's here. We have accepted this as money. And that's why I think people are still so slow to wrap their heads around all of this, which is to our benefit, because we already get it. We already not only understand it, we understand the importance of it and the importance of accumulating as much of it as possible before this supply shock begins to really take place. Because I thought, contrarians, we were getting pretty close. We are even closer than I anticipated us being. In all likelihood, I'll share my numbers here in a moment. But most people's apprehension, like I said, was because they just didn't know what this was going to become. They didn't know if it was going to be accepted not only by people, but by institutions. Because as investors, that's what really matters. That's what I've been saying the entire time this podcast has been on the air. But over the last few years, in a very short amount of time, The answer to both of those questions has been a resounding yes. And the only reason retail isn't piling in right now is simply because prices are higher than they can remember them being in the past. The same people who were saying, I don't want to buy Bitcoin, it's $30,000. That's really high. That's way higher than it was before. These are the exact same people saying the exact same thing now at Bitcoin's current price. Please do not ever become one of these people. That this is why we're going to have a real have and have not system in this world. It's to the point now to where pretty much everybody in the world could buy Bitcoin if they wanted to. Whether it's a little or a lot, it doesn't matter. But so many of them still won't. But I know who will. The deep pockets, the big institutions, because they've already done it and they're going to buy a lot more. Now, this is all well and good if it were something like gold, which you can mine more of, or United States dollars, which you can print endless amounts of. But no, this is something that is one day going to run out. And you have the largest players in the world scrambling to get their piece. There's only 21 million of them. And like I said before, probably closer to 16. Now, you still have about 1.1 million Bitcoin left to be mined. But we're not talking about that. I'm talking about in total, it's not even 21. It's probably closer to 16 when you account for all the Bitcoin that was either lost or people died with it and didn't pass it down, and the amount of people in the future who will die with theirs and not pass them down. 16 might even be too high. That's just the number I'm putting on it. But there's almost a race to zero because people know what it is now, and they know the alternative. And the alternative, if you think that alternative is fiat currency, there's other alternatives, but compared to fiat currency, the whole world knows now, because of social media and the fact that we can all talk to each other, which was the worst thing to ever happen to the elite ruling class. We all know how trash fiat currency is and how much it devalues over time. Do you want to be the institution holding all fiat currency? I doubt it. Maybe you'll hold gold. Okay. Maybe you'll hold assets. Okay. Two good options. But what if Bitcoin surpasses both of those two things by a lot, and all of your competitors have some and you don't? Do you understand the need to accumulate as much as possible, even if you are an institution who does not yet believe in it? This is going to happen. It's only a matter of when or how soon. Now, to find out how soon, I ran some numbers. I took the top 10 exchanges because that is where most of the world, including institutions, get their Bitcoin, where they purchase their Bitcoin from. Now, when it comes to these exchanges, they have a cold wallet where they have their reserves, and they have their hot wallet, which is available for trading and retail buying and things like that. Now, you have to have your reserves the same way a casino has to have, by law, their reserves. If you guys remember Ocean's 11, they must have in reserves, just like a casino, a 1-to-1 ratio, which matches the amount traded on their exchanges. Now, this reserve in their cold wallet is not for sale, so we don't even bother with that. So just take all of that Bitcoin completely off the market. It does not exist because it's not available. We are concerned with the amount that is still out there for sale should somebody want it. So I looked at the top 10 exchanges in terms of the amount of Bitcoin they have altogether. This is hot wallet and cold wallet. Number one, you have Binance at 650,000 Bitcoin, and they are number one by far. Second place is OKX with 100,000. Then Kraken was 75,000. HTX, which is Huobi, was 65,000. Bybit was 60,000. Gate.io and BitGet with 55,000 each. Crypto.com with 40,000. MEXC has 45,000. And then Gemini with 35,000. Now you'll notice one glaring omission from that list. Can anybody tell me who it is? That's right. I did not say Coinbase. Oddly enough, Coinbase only right now, between their hot wallet, which is available for purchase, and their cold wallet, which holds their reserves, is only at 11,000 Bitcoin. Holy shit. Now, there's one other piece to this puzzle when it comes to Coinbase. They have an institutional wallet, of sorts, which handles the Bitcoin they custody for the BlackRocks and Fidelities of the world. But again, that doesn't really count because that doesn't apply to anybody who wants to buy more. But because of all the institutional buying that a lot of these ETFs have already done from Coinbase, they have taken their supplies down all the way to where they are now. Not even top 10, not even close. These institutions, in a matter of about a year, have already managed to suck Coinbase almost completely dry in terms of what they actually have available. Now, when I do the math, and these are estimations, I was given ranges, and so I just took the middle of the range, and then I added them all up, and it adds up to 1,156,000 Bitcoin. But remember, this is on their hot wallets and their cold wallets. What's really available to the public is about 20% of what these exchanges actually hold. So if you take 20% of the number I just gave, that equals about 231,000 Bitcoin. And that's it. Now, of course, you can get Bitcoin from other exchanges, other places, but these are the main places you go. You go to exchanges, and this is certainly the majority of the supply out there. Again, to avoid dumb comments, we're not talking about the Bitcoin that people exchange back and forth via trading or peer-to-peer, or if you transfer Tether for Bitcoin on a wallet somewhere. It's all being held somewhere, possibly by one of these exchanges, possibly as a subsidiary of one of these exchanges. We don't really think about it. If we exchange Tether for Bitcoin, for example, we're not really thinking about where that Bitcoin is coming from. But chances are it ends up in one of these large exchanges. But all of this is irrelevant to what I'm talking about. There's only a finite amount left, and it doesn't even come close to the appetite which is out there currently. What appetite is this? Well, I ran the numbers there as well. And this is only for the top 10 institutions which have bought Bitcoin in the last 2 years. I'm ignoring literally everything else. And we'll talk about that everything else in a moment, but let's just stick with the top 10. So the top 10 are in no particular order, I don't think. MicroStrategy, BlackRock, Grayscale, Fidelity, ARK Invest, Marathon Digital Holdings, Tesla, Robinhood Markets, Galaxy Digital Holdings, and Metaplanet. And combined, in the last year and a half to 2 years, they have bought 1.3 million Bitcoin. And do you think they're done? Do you think Michael Saylor's not going to buy any more? You think BlackRock's not going to buy any more? Like, in what world? Why would that not happen? So if they were to simply replicate this in the next 2-3 years, give them that much time, another 1.3 million, where are they going to get it from? There's only 231,000 available, plus a little more from some of the other exchanges. And some of these exchanges might not even work with these institutions, so it's irrelevant, right? Notice, out of those top 10 institutions, 8 of them were American. Galaxy's Canadian, Metaplanet's Japanese. So this brings me into my next section here. All of the appetite that is still yet to come, just from the institutional side. China announced for the 17th time that they're banning Bitcoin. It will come back, but institutions there are going to be very interested. They've probably already bought some. China doesn't report, or else they purposely report incorrectly. But we can't sit there and ignore the world's second biggest economy. And then literally everybody else who wants to come in. They're just not here yet. They're almost here. In America alone, J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs are all going to be buying Bitcoin. They just haven't yet. What is it going to look like when they're in the mix? What is it going to look like when all these other world institutions are in the mix? What is it going to look like when more countries adopt a sovereign Bitcoin reserve just like they did with gold? And then what is retail going to do when word finally gets out, and it will because of social media, that we are almost completely out of Bitcoin? Contrarians, we have these huge, big, hungry appetites all competing for one plate of food. Seriously, think of it that way. And this plate of food will never completely diminish, but just little bits are going to trickle onto it bit by bit. And it's going to get gobbled up immediately when it does. This just hasn't happened yet, but it is about to, which means, not financial advice, I think you would be well served to get your hands on as much of it as humanly possible right now, within the confines of smart investing. I'm not saying go full maxi. Some of these maxis got 98, 99% of their net worth in Bitcoin. I think that is reckless. I think these people don't have a very strong financial background, and most of what they learned came from the Bitcoin ecosystem. But that's fine. I hope they win. They are probably going to win big. But I've already disclosed before I'm looking to have 25% of my net worth into Bitcoin. And we will talk more about this when that episode comes. That episode should be coming this month for sure. But the question of when shouldn't even really be entering your minds. Like, I would just be getting as much as I can right now and continue to do so. Allocate some of what I make and put that into Bitcoin the same as you would just put it into a 401k, which is probably going to vastly underperform what Bitcoin is probably going to do in the same amount of time. But to try to get an idea of when this real supply shock might be happening. I consulted AI. Now, AI is not the arbiter of truth or great predictioneering, but they will do a better job than most. So I asked Grok, ChatGPT, and Gemini all the same question. And I got 3 different answers. Grok, they were the ones that gave us the longest runway. They said closer to 2028. And they actually stated the halving as one of their reasons, which I don't think that's going to really make much of a difference at all. I think we're well beyond that at this point. But that was the reason Grok gave. Gemini, let's pull up Gemini. They said that the supply shock phase would be happening in late 2025 to early 2026. If you guys didn't know, 2025 is right now, and we are in Q3 of 2025. So they're saying Q4 of 2025 to early 2026 is going to be known as the supply shock phase. Now, whether this becomes known as the supply shock phase or whether it is happening behind the scenes doesn't really matter. Well, kind of does, because if it was known, then that would increase the speed of this. But you get the point, right? If there's only 230,000 Bitcoin left on the 10 major exchanges, you mean to tell me that JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley couldn't just buy all that up right now? Probably could if they wanted to. And that's completely ignoring the major ETFs that are out there. And the new ETFs, which will be coming around shortly, and ETFs coming on other exchanges and institutions and all of these other places around the world with very deep pockets. I don't think what Gemini said is a total stretch. But let's check out ChatGPT. ChatGPT says we're already there. It actually began last year when ETFs started buying everything up, and the rate that they were buying up Bitcoin outpaced mining production. And then that number only became more and more lopsided as 2024 and 2025 went on. And then they say the price dislocations, which we'll talk about in a moment, price dislocations is a 2025 to 2026 phenomenon. So now up until next year. And then they said post-2028 is when the true structural scarcity will begin. And they also point to the halving. And keep in mind, too, they're looking at this part of it in terms of overall demand compared to how much is actually going to be mined. But let me tell you, if we get to that point and the only new Bitcoin being put out onto the market is what the miners are bringing to the table, we could easily see over $1 million per Bitcoin. Because if there is a supply shock, and the world is aware of it. Remember, the only way to put more Bitcoin into the system, because it's not gold, it's not fiat, is to have the people holding it release it into the system. Now, how do you make them do that? You can get all doomer with it and say they're going to require you to sell your Bitcoin. When that day comes, let me know, all right? I don't see a future like that. And enforcing something like this is going to be tremendously hard to do, all right? The only way you're going to get people to release it is for them to sell it themselves. And for them to sell it themselves, you need to entice them to do so. And that is why, in the world of supply and demand, that is why price goes up. Supply is low, you must increase it. You can either do that by diluting and printing more or granting more shares or however you would normally do it, but you can't do those things with Bitcoin. You must make holders sell. And if the whole world knows we're in a supply shock, they're not going to want to sell. You're going to have to really, really bring price higher just to get even a trickle of what you want on that dinner plate available for all these huge, ravenous institutions to immediately gobble up. Contrarians, do you see the situation that is likely to happen in the very near future? Gigantic, hungry mouths, all surrounding one relatively small plate of food, and this plate of food barely replenishes itself as the appetites of those around it just keep getting bigger and bigger. And this appetite will never be satisfied. Institutions, along with the rest of us, will be forced to buy at much, much higher prices. It's not like you're going to go somewhere and they'll be like, sorry, we don't have any Bitcoin for you. They're probably going to have some, but they can't sell it all because then it would completely run out. Or even if they do sell it all, they got to do it slowly. They can't have it all be gone in 3 seconds. They're going to have to charge an absolute fortune and make sure when people buy it, they're only buying tiny little pieces of it at a time. Again, I don't know when. I can certainly see it happening very soon. But if you want to go to YouTube, this podcast also goes to YouTube, and talk me out of this scenario and tell me how it's not going to happen, I'm all ears. I mean, barring something just insane. Okay, a recession or a world war, something like that, might delay the inevitable, but it might also accelerate it too. You can't write off that possibility. I mean, maybe something like a double spend, if something like that is discovered, that would shatter confidence for a while. I mean, trust me, I look for both sides on this. I'm not a cultist. I have to come up with the right answer. My portfolio and my reputation as a financial broadcaster depends on it. But the overall solutions portion of this podcast, let's go ahead and start that now. One, not financial advice. You're probably going to want to get your hands on some of this. And if you have some, you're probably going to want more. I think the days of dropping 70% are completely over with. Like, grown-up, mature, smart money is here now to where before it wasn't. And that's a pretty big difference. You know, I kept saying before, anything that drops 70% in a year is not a flight to safety. Well, if Bitcoin shows that it's not going to do that anymore, it could very well become a flight to safety. And for many people, it already is and already has been. So if price go down scares you, I wouldn't let it scare you that much. You know what we're definitely going to see for sure when it comes to price go down is the purchasing power of your fiat currency. That's been established. That's a known. So you choose. Now, if you can imagine a supply shock scenario happening and what that world is going to look like and what it will do to Bitcoin, understand that the Bitcoin you hold is going to become far more endangered than it is now. And right now, there are already people getting robbed for their Bitcoin. So what do you think this will look like if Bitcoin reaches 1 million per? Protect yourself out there. I've already begun to do this. I told you I have my Bitcoin separated between hot wallets, which are no longer on the phone I carry with me, cold wallet, which I also don't have with me, and you guys know if you follow me on Twitter, I bought more Bitcoin in the form of the ETF FBTC. You guys also know I am the king of spreading things out to ludicrous degrees, but I don't think this is ludicrous. 3 different ways. If somebody were to try to rob me, good luck. You better hope your gun is bigger than mine is. But if it ever were to happen, there's very little damage you could ever do. And yes, my safety is in more danger than yours is because I am a semi-public figure in the financial media world, and you know I own Bitcoin. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't protect yourself as well. We could enter a world where people are just robbing others on the idea that they might have Bitcoin just because of what you look like or what you might be wearing. Because also, as a nice little bonus, if Bitcoin rockets up like this, most of crypto is probably going to follow. So if they think you have any crypto at all, not just Bitcoin, they're going to come after you. It's going on right now with these so-called wrench attacks. And again, we are seeing this happen, and we are seeing the amount of phishing scams and hacks increase while we are still extremely early in the cycle. All right. So if you want to go back to the basic OPSEC episode I've done on this podcast, protecting yourself now and just setting up the structure for how you're going to store this stuff in the future is, I think, of critical importance. A lot of people are probably aware, but they're just not going to do it out of laziness. And those are the people you see on the blogs the next day, in the newspaper, on TV, as attack victims. That was the whole point of that OPSEC episode. It's like, why do all the things we're doing on this podcast if you're just going to allow somebody to take it from you in the end? It's kind of pointless, right? Not to imagine all the emotional trauma it's going to cause. So step 1, buy Bitcoin. Step 2, protect yourself. Step 2 1/4, let's say, because based on everything I have already told you, there is another asset out here which does fit some of this criteria and may in the future fit more of this criteria. And can anybody tell me what I'm about to say? Look into Litecoin if you haven't already. All right. So also finite, 84 million instead of 21 million overall. Also proof of work, also mined, also has already over almost 90% of it mined out already. But again, you have to imagine a world where we have this insane supply shock in Bitcoin. That is going to be a different world than what we're in right now. And this is where VP's cuckoo Litecoin theory comes into play. And I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. That I think people are going to say, wow, because this is how people's minds are programmed. They don't think in percentages like we do, because we've already seen this. They're like, wow, that's a really high price for Bitcoin. I can't afford that. You can. You get a fraction of it like everybody else does. But they don't understand that. Like, I can't afford that. Is there anything else finite out there that comes at a cheaper price? Well, you're in luck, sir, madam. There is. And it works the same way Bitcoin does. Just doesn't quite have the network effect yet. And that thing is called Litecoin. And also Bitcoin Cash. Problem is, right now, Bitcoin Cash also has the $84 million hard cap, but is currently 5 times the cost of Litecoin and doesn't get used nearly as much and doesn't also have an ETF or more coming in the future. So not only can your average ding-dong go out and buy a cheaper alternative, institutions can too, and some or likely most of these institutions will have missed out on getting as much Bitcoin as they wanted to get. But there will still be fairly cheap Litecoin available. If you don't think people are going to go for the cheaper option just because they don't know, look at what just happened. Look at what happened with XRP. XRP saw a huge run-up in retail buying. Was it because those people had any idea what XRP was? I doubt it. Seriously doubt it. XRP is relatively hard to understand as far as the top cryptos go. You think somebody who didn't even really have a working knowledge of Bitcoin was going to learn a bunch about XRP? No, they bought it because they saw the price of Bitcoin, and then they saw the price of Ethereum, and then they saw the price of XRP. And then they went below that, and they saw the price of BNB token, and they're like, yeah, I want to buy the thing that's $3. I had one of my friends back home who knows I have Bitcoin because I talk about it on our little WhatsApp thread. And he says, what do you think I should buy, Bitcoin or XRP? And I'm like, well, how much do you know about XRP? He's like, I don't know anything. This is anecdotal evidence, but I'll bet you it's not the only time this has happened. I guarantee you it's not. It's probably more common than you think it is. So don't sit there and tell me for 1 minute that people aren't going to look at the price of Bitcoin and then finally understand why it costs so damn much because it's so finite, go looking for other finite things and not see Litecoin right there on the doorstep. Seriously, as far as my listener base goes, if I have 98% of you on board with me with this Bitcoin theory and 2% against me, it's probably completely flipped when it comes to Litecoin. It's probably only 2% of you are on board with this, what should not be, in my opinion, a crazy theory. But the rest of you just simply aren't. I would maybe strongly consider looking this way too, for the reasons I stated. There may also come a day where we run short on Litecoin as well. And you're going to really want to have a piece of that pie when that time comes. And oh, by the way, a much bigger piece of the pie you can have right now compared to if you bought Bitcoin. Just saying. I figure if there was ever a time to throw that in, it was this episode right here. Now, you guys know what I'm going to end the show with, as I often do. Obviously, I think it's all pretty obvious now that buying Bitcoin is not crazy. Maybe scrambling to buy as much as you can now, which I don't officially recommend, like I said, but I'm just hinting at it. That part might be seen as a bit crazy right now in August of 2025. That might seem a bit crazy in present day, but it always seemed a bit crazy at the time back when we bought what we bought. But it's not looking that way now, is it? Be crazy. Who cares? Just be early.